Hola todos. You came back. Gracias. Me llamo Roberto. And that's all I got right there. Let's start. I just want to say thank you for being here. It means a lot to us that you've taken time out of your busy schedules to be here with us and spend a day and a half, and it's only going to get better from here. So, question for you. Let's start with a question. Show of hands. I'm going to make this really easy. You're a very responsive audience, and we appreciate that. Who likes data? Anyone like data? Okay, I thought maybe there'd be a little interest. Who likes insights and trends? Okay, this is a little bit of a warm-up. We're going to go back. Now you don't use your hands, you use your voice. Who likes data? Now you have to answer in your local language. Do you like insights and trends? Sí. That was beautiful. That was better than my C. You're going to get a lot of data, insights, and trends in this next session. We're going to spend an hour, and we're going to split that hour in two. And so take two different perspectives and dimensions on this. One is an outside-in view. So we've got two guest speakers, one from Kayak and one from STR, who will lead us off and give us more industry trends that are completely relevant to Latin America. And then we will host a panel of Booking.com leaders who will give you more of an inside-out view of what we're seeing. And we're going to focus on all the regions of the world as it pertains to travelers that come to Latin America. Sound good? Let's not waste any time. Sí, gracias, yes. Let's get started. I would like your help in welcoming our first presenter. She is from Kayak. She's a senior manager of the Latin America region, and her name is Liz Vives.
Entonces decía, mucho gusto estar con ustedes el día de hoy. Very happy to be here. The presentation will be in English, as you know, like we do all the presentation in English. I'm so happy to be here and to be presenting some data about the industry and about what we have at Kayak, right? And I think first I'd like to thank Robert for introducing me. And I'm also thanking Booking to invite us and to having us here to bring some more data. And also I'd like to thank you all to be here and to have this space of exchange. I think it's so important, like to exchange ideas, exchange about the future, and above all, like make synergies all together to get to the growth of this industry, right? First, I will introduce myself very quickly. I'm French. I'm the regional manager for Kayak in Latam. But I've lived in Mexico for 12 years now, so I consider myself a Mexican at heart, or Mexicana de corazón. I know a lot of you here are from Mexico. And so first we will go some very quick overview about Kayak. Then I will go through regional travel trends, above all looking at LATAM travelers, and then we will go to a quick snapshot of Mexico and a very quick snapshot of Brazil, since I know most of you here are from Mexico, but the idea is also to compare a bit the behaviors, right? So first, entering into Kayak. Well, Kayak is a technology company. We help millions of travelers around the world. We are leaders in an industry, and important to know that we are part of Booking Holdings, which also Booking.com is part of. We are sister companies. And we are part with a lot of different companies around the globe, and we are a meta search. This is the big difference with a company like Booking.com, for example. What does that mean? It means that we are comparing prices of flights, hotels, car rentals, and other bunch of verticals in the world, and we always work to have the most exhaustive and complete inventory of airline partners, hotels and stays, properties, package, rental cars, etc. around the world, so that people can actually compare all the options and make wise and confident decisions for their next travel. So we process billions of queries every year across all our different platforms and brands. We have over millions verified guest reviews, almost 17 million email subscribers, and almost 9 million social followers around the globe. I would say that, as you all know, we all work in this industry because we think that it's essential really to discover yourself and to expand your world and your opportunities, right? And one point important that we know is that every traveler is different, right? And at Kayak, we know that people use our technology and they come back. They always reuse it to compare the prices. So the Kayak traveler takes an average of 3 trips a year. Now, entering into regional travel trends, just before entering, I'd just like to mention that, as you all know, the travel industry, and sometimes I don't know if we forget it, but it's a very key, important sector in the industry, in the economy in general. According to the World WTTC, World Travel and Tourism Council, it accounted in 2022 of about 7.6% of the GDP. And it's growing, and we will be back at some point at 2019 levels. So this is a very important sector we're in that is key to global connectivity, key to global cooperation, and well, to economic growth, basically. So entering into regional travel trends, first, I'd like to mention that, remember, Kayak analyzes searches data. So we are a bit like upper funnel of everything, like with the intention of traveling and the search of people. And so first, looking at the anticipation of search data, we see that international flights is where we anticipate most and where people in LATAM are searching first, well, 12 weeks in advance, against 7 weeks for domestic. And hotel and car rental are a bit down the line, with 7 weeks and 4 weeks in advance. Important to notice as well that in comparison to 2019, we are searching for hotels 50% less in advance. So in the end, the uncertainty, let's say, is a reality, and we are more searching a bit more last minute, let's say, than 2019, according to our search data from January up until August this year. Then if we look at what we call length of stay, that is what LATAM travelers are searching in terms of length of stay of flights, hotels, and car rental. It's written in Spanish. So we can see that international trips are longer than domestic in terms of flights and the other verticals as well that you would expect. Also, flights, we can see that in stays, in general, it's shorter. Why? Because in general, people would stay at different destinations or cities in one trip, whether it's domestic or international. And car rental is 7 days in general, meaning that for domestic trips, in general, maybe they don't take a flight and they just go outside of their origin city for a time, and maybe around, we can say, the slow travel tendency that we have seen, that we want to reduce our ecological footprint as well. That is even more important those days in the region. And for international trips, where you just do a road trip for a part of your travels. And also, one thing important to notice, if we talk about accommodation and comparing to 2019, is that we are in LATAM looking for stays that are 26% longer than 2019. So that's also an important piece of data in comparison to pre-pandemics. I don't like the word pandemic, but sometimes we still have to use it. Now, if we look a bit of more of a deep dive into the stays vertical and the difference of the different type of accommodation that people are searching for, we can see that hotel is the biggest winner and leading the way in both domestic and international. We see that hostels have a bigger chunk of clicks. We are looking at the amounts of clicks here for international trips, as well as for resort. And bed and breakfast are more during domestic. And vacation rental, here if you look at the data we have, is basically the same for both domestic and international, again looking at LATAM travelers. Now let's deep dive into the destinations. I'd say this is the top 10 most searched destinations by LATAM travelers, again. So if we look at it, I would say the first important thing to notice is that it's very green on the right side. What does that mean? I would say that that's a big indicator of recovery, because the demand in comparison to 2019 has been growing. So that's a good indicator, and that's something positive to call out. Again, looking at the destination as such, we can see that 7 out of 10 are inside Latin America. Only 3 are international. The first one is Madrid in second position. And then we have 2 destinations in the US that are Miami and New York. And then we can see that we have cities like Buenos Aires, for example, in Argentina. I don't know if someone is from Buenos Aires here, but it's been known as one of the quickest recovery touristic destination in the region. So probably that's why we see those green numbers. And we see Medellin appearing in Colombia, and it wasn't appearing in the same search as before. And then we will have a quick outlook of where are people searching from to come visit LATAM. It's always complicated, like, to explain exactly the data. So coming from or searching from to come by plane first. We'll see that the United States, of course, that's not a surprise. US travelers are the first one with a bigger chunk of demand, but still lower than 2019. Then we see France appearing here. Well, I'm French, I'm happy to see France here. But we have to be careful because, of course, it's a lot. Pointe-à-Pitre is the capital of Guadeloupe Island. And it's a French overseas territory. So it's also because a lot of people are traveling to visit friends and families and to visit a French overseas territories. And then I would say you see that European travelers are coming, but is still significantly lower, are searching, but it's still significantly lower than 2019. And a good call out here is Canada. We see that there is a big growth year over year. That does mean that we open more flight seats between Canada and LATAM region in general. That's why also we see this spike. Although we always have to be very careful in comparing to last year numbers, because as you all know, probably last year was a big growth moment for the industry, above all in terms of searches, because there was this big spike. Everybody wanted to travel again, including me, including all of you, I'm sure of it. So it's always very hard, like, to compare growth against growth. So that's why we're also comparing to 2019, and that's here also the importance, right? And finally, on the hotel side, receptive tourism. So again, who is looking for to come to LATAM destinations and stay in hotels? First, the US is the most important one, even again a bit lower than 2019. And then we have Canada in second position and completely green. So in Cancun is the first destination of choice for Canada in the region. And we can see that Cancun and Punta Cana are like the 2 lead destination where international travelers are coming to visit and stay in hotels. And again, we can see that European are coming, a lot of growing in comparison to last year, but it's still significantly lower than 2019. So important to also call out. A very quick snapshot on Mexico. Those are data from 2022 because we needed a full year to compare and to see which is the calendar of travel. And which is interesting is that Mexico is a country with very defined travel dates. As probably a lot of you know, we don't have that many holidays, even if now it's went by from 6 to 12 holidays that are by law. Well, the most important moments are Easter, Independence Day, Revolution Day, that are like the bank holidays, and summer and end of year holidays. And most of those moments are in the second semester. Looking at the most searched destination, I'd say that here it's interesting because 50% are international destinations. And if you look at it, the 2 are in Canada. So it's also a very good call out. Again, more seats open between Mexico and Canada. And the rest are, from US and also Europe. In the past, you would have seen in this list a lot of US destinations. So now it's a good point that, Mexicans are traveling to and searching to travel to many other destinations, and not only beach destination, because only one city is known as a beach destination, the others are more cities. And in terms of receptive tourism, again, now in terms of flights, we see again the US first, and then Canada. And what's interesting is also that we see a growing part, and above all, if you compare to before, from Latin America coming to Mexico as well. Not only European, not only US and Canada. And finally, because we're on time, on the hotel side, again, United States and Canada. And you can see that several countries from the region, Peru, Costa Rica, Colombia, and Guatemala, and some countries from Europe. So thank you again for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Lise. Take that with you, you bet. So that was really a search and search intent perspective through Kayak, and now I think you're all familiar with STR, and we'll take a look at really actual what's happening, which is very complementary, maybe a little bit different. And please join me in welcoming the Senior Director of Latin America for STR, Patricia Bo.
Buenos dias. I think some bon dia is also in order. It's great to be here. So I heard you all before saying that you love data. Is that true? Yes. Let's see. Okay. And is it true that you know STR? Okay. So then I can skip through some of the slides. So STR is a data provider. We've been doing this for many, many years. Hotel performance, benchmarking data for hospitality. I think one of the differences is that our sample is one of the most global, and as you can see, it's nearly 80,000 hotels, data, over 10 million rooms on daily basis that report data to us. And I think I just want to comment here that it's not only about brands and it's not only about brand performance, but we also work with 10,000 independent properties across the world. So just wanted to put that out there. What we're going to be talking about today is to set the scene a little bit what's happening around the world. We're going to dive into the region, and I want to bring 2 topics. One is how is leisure comparing to corporate or urban hotels, and also touch a little bit on the luxury segment and how it's helped us to, especially with the recovery period. So to start, I think it's important to kind of look back and say the past 3-4 years have been very, very unusual. We know that in 2020, the world stopped traveling, right? I mean, that's what happened. So a lot of uncertainty. We didn't know if we were going to recover, when. And I think it's important to take a second to say, how individuals and organizations really came together and saw the resilience of the industry to push forward and be where we are today here. 2021 was all about travel rebound. So what happened here, people were trying to get out of the cities. So we saw how regional destinations, leisure were the first to recover. People were really looking for that sort of wellness. I call it escapism. You just wanted to get out of the house, really. So any destination where you felt slightly comfortable, you will go there. And also connectivity wasn't really up and running like we would like. We know Mexico was probably one of the best examples on keeping everything open, but the majority of the world was pretty much closed. So you didn't have choices. 2022 was what we call the revenge travel. Why is that? Because people found themselves, especially those like us, most of us, I imagine, that we were just working from home. So what we were doing is, we had holidays, time off. We had probably some savings because we haven't been traveling as much. And we really wanted we were eager to travel and we wanted to rediscover some places. So that benefited a lot the luxury segment, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. And then this year, it's all about business. So we are all here today. Business is really, really back. So why I'm saying this is because all of this history, these past few years, they've been developing a trend. But where we are standing today, we're looking at the global occupancy index to 2019, and we can see that we're pretty much at the same levels. The past few months, it's been about 3 to 4% below 2019. I feel like the mic is on and off. And that is very important, especially considering that supply has also been growing. We've seen since 2019 supply growth between 6-7%. So we're talking about 1.5 million rooms that been added to the supply, right? So we're pretty much at the same levels. And it's not all about occupancy or demand, but we've been seeing how ADR is really been pushing RevPAR growth and RevPAR recovery. So we're seeing here that composition of RevPAR between occupancy and ADR, and as you can see, it's clearly ADR driven. However, it's important to point out how on the past few months, there is a slowdown, and we're going to be talking about that with some examples. This is not STR data. It's actually from the US Department of Commerce, but I thought it was interesting to see the US market, especially for markets like Cancun and Mexico in general, it's one of the source markets, so it's very important. And seeing that they are traveling, US citizens are traveling a lot more than in 2019 is extremely important for us to know. And not only that, but they're also traveling to different places. They're traveling more to different places, and they continue to travel within the region. So we're seeing here percentage change for the second quarter of 2023 versus 2019. And we can see Mexico, South America, Central America, and also the Caribbean. They've also been traveling to other places, so we saw, especially during the summer, a huge increase to travel to Europe. And what that means is that it's just a shift on the demand. So we're probably some markets that were seeing more of US travelers coming in are now kind of diversifying where they're going. And how this translates into occupancy. Well, we see the global occupancy is pretty much in line with what I was saying earlier. We are recovered or about to recover. It changes depending on the region. We see Central America, how is 8% above 2019 levels. Other markets not doing so well. And probably the big elephant in the room is always China, right? So what's happening here? All the markets that depend on China travelers are those that are doing slightly worse than the rest. So it's mostly Asia, and sort of Australia, Pacific Islands. So where does the region stand? We're looking at the global, we look at the global occupancy. We're not looking at absolute numbers for occupancy by country, and it diverges a little bit. So we see Puerto Rico kind of leading, is 77.4 occupancy, pretty good. On the other hand, we have Peru that is really lagging behind, and in Peru had a tough time, extended period after the pandemic with social and political unrest that kind of put more pressure on traveling, not only international, but also domestic. And the rest of the country are pretty much doing as expected, between the 56%, 66% occupancy. Mexico, however, has been showing us the strength of the demand and the strength of traveling. We're looking at the overall country here, and this is weekly demand comparing to 2019. So we're seeing how, for pretty much 18 months straight, demand is just growing and growing above 10% on average. There's a couple of weeks there in May and November where there's a decline, but overall it's very positive. And it's not only demand or occupancy, as I mentioned, we're seeing the same in rates. Now here we're looking at two different numbers. We have, since 2021, we've been seeing ADR growth. Now this ADR growth above 20%, 30% in some cases, when we adjust it to inflation, it drops slightly. So that blue dotted line that you're seeing, that's your adjusted or your real ADR. And you can see how on average it's about 7%. So it's still above 2019 levels and it's still very positive. But again, I mentioned this earlier, it's slowing down. We look at the last few months and it's starting to slow down. And this is normal. It's normal behavior because last year, 2022, we saw extreme growth, especially on the leisure segment, right? So that growth is not sustainable. So seeing a slowdown on that ADR growth is what we would expect. Now, how is comparing urban versus leisure? So why this is important? I talk about how leisure was the beginning of the recovery. So when we all started to travel, it wasn't for business, it was for pleasure. And that helped the industry to recover. But can we really talk about recovery until corporate is back? So what we did here is compare some of the main markets, some of the main leisure markets and corporate markets, and kind of see how they're doing compared to last year. So we're not talking about 2019 anymore. We're not talking about recovery. We're talking about how they're doing this year compared to last. And it's interesting, well, Cancun remains strong-ish, so it's a 2% growth compared to last year, but the majority of the leisure markets are already seeing declines. Now, again, I don't want to worry people when they see these red numbers because we're talking about double-digit growth last year, so a slowdown or even a decline is expected. But the interesting part is that the kind of growth that we're seeing in markets like Buenos Aires, Mexico City, Santiago, Bogota, is the kind of growth that we saw last year with. So does that mean that corporate is coming back? I think so. Let's see. Let's look at Mexico now. Here a combination of leisure and urban or corporate, however you want to call them, markets. And we have a split on weekday and weekends. So typically when, at least at STR, when we talk about weekends, we tend to refer to leisure demand, and when we talk about weekdays, it's more corporate related. What I want to point out are two things. The first is that if you look at the weekend, which is the lower part, so just below, the majority of the market have higher occupancies than during the weekdays, right? There is no market below 50% occupancy. When we go up to the weekdays, then we see a couple of examples where the occupancy is below. I think San Miguel de Allende is standing out there, but in general, occupancy is lower during the weekdays. And the second thing that I want to point out here is the color of the bubbles means RevPAR. So if it's green, the greener is the highest RevPAR, and then it kind of, you take your palette going down all the way to red. So what we're seeing here is that international markets are performing better and are having better RevPAR than those that are more domestic related. When we go to the cities, going back to the corporate segment, so some examples like Santiago and Quito, they are doing much, much better. So this year they're really coming back. We're seeing a normal behavior here. We're going back to weekly occupancy, so that's why you see a lot more spikes, because it's your weekday, weekend kind of spiking. But overall, it's either above or around the middle line, the 100 line, which is the 2019 index, with the exception of Peruvian markets like Lima and Cusco. Both of them still, for the reasons that I mentioned earlier, is still lagging behind. But what is part of this demand happening in the cities? I wanted to bring to you not past occupancy, but the forward occupancy. So how is the business on the books? How is your occupancy on the books? Here we're looking at occupancy 90 days ahead of us. And I use Bogota and Medellin as an example because events are really impacting the demand coming into the cities. So if we look at Medellin, both cases really, performance or bookings are more in advance than they were last year, and then we can see the impact of these events. When we look at Medellin, again, these events, mostly social, but the music events are making a huge impact. We see some examples, I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. So the RBD show that is happening in November is already having half of the city filled. So 50% occupancy already for that weekend. And it's not only music events. If we go, sorry, that was my BCBCB for Medellin. That's what happens when you play with animations. You really need to be spot on. Anyway, forgive me. I wanted to move back from music events and bees into the Formula One weekend. So what we're looking at here is, again, business on the books. How is the occupancy for the next 90 days? And we see the Formula One weekend for Mexico City is already filling 6 out of 10 rooms. Now, this data was taken 10 days ago, so probably now it's even better. Why I'm mentioning this? Because there's one trend that we saw during the pandemic that is shifting, and that was that the booking window shortened a lot. Now we're starting to see the booking window extending a little bit, and that is very positive, especially when we're doing budgeting, we know that. Now, another segment that is very interesting, and I use Cancun because for me it's the best example, is what people call leisure. I heard other names, but it's just that example of, we have Cancun with weekend demand for leisure demand during the week, we have social events on weekends, we have corporate events like today during the week. And what that means is that demand is not shifting so much between weekdays and weekends, and we see that it's very much aligned. So we're looking at Cancun occupancy for the weekday and the weekend. Slightly different, yes, 2-3 points difference in occupancy, but it's very much following the same trend, and that's very positive. And now, we've seen corporate, we've seen leisure. Now, another segment within the leisure that is the resorts. So I'm not using Mexico as an example. I'm using Brazil here. And that is because Brazil is over 90% of the demand is domestic. So completely different to what you see in Mexico, right? And even though being domestic, we're seeing a huge increase in both occupancy and ADR. So Brazilians are traveling within their country. They're going to resorts more than urban hotels, as you can see, and they're spending more. And within this segment, it's interesting to also see how the all-inclusive segment is getting the best part of the pie. So they're really spending more at these resorts, and we see more growth in terms of revenue for the all-inclusive segment. So we're looking at, for those that are not that familiar with this term, so TRevPAR and TRevPAR is your total revenue per occupied or per available room. And we see 82% growth when we're looking at TRevPAR. And just your general total revenue increase over 70% for all-inclusive. So huge difference compared to the resorts that offer other sort of plans, European plan, like you call it here. So let's just finish with the luxury segment. Just very briefly, I thought it was interesting. I mentioned at the beginning how the luxury segment helped with the recovery. And I think when we compare here the year-to-date, 2023 to 2019, we see that happen for South America, Central America, and especially for the Caribbean. No surprise, the Caribbean, is the majority of the supply is sort of on the luxury high end, especially when you go to some of the smaller islands. But in general, it's just the category that has been driving the recovery. And when we look at Mexico, these are absolute numbers for occupancy. We've seen, again, growth, although it's interesting that not so much with 2019, but more compared to last year. So there's still demand coming in all classes, really, not just luxury. What is really been luxury driving is ADR. When we look again at Mexico, we saw how compared to 2019, ADR grew by 32%. And that 32% is not inflation adjusted, so you know how to do your math. But what is interesting here are two things. One is that although we saw such a growth compared to 2019, it declined compared to last year, and that is what I was talking about earlier, and I want to reinforce that. We're seeing a slowdown on ADR, and that is being reflected here. But also how when you look at the lower classes, so your mid-scale and economy hotels, those are the only ones that are presenting higher ADR compared to last year. And this is very important because this segment usually tends to identify how the domestic demand, both for leisure and corporate, are coming back and are stronger. And in countries like Mexico, it is a very important segment to consider, especially when you go out to secondary cities. So what is the new normal? We did a study. We do this every 3 months, and we basically asked some of the professionals in the industry, what are the greatest challenges for your business? And always the main challenge is the labor cost. Now, this is very, very, very important in the US. When we ask Europeans, they tend to diversify a little bit more the response, so they're not as concerned with labor as they are, for example, with energy or the utility costs. But there are two things that are coming up that are kind of new. One is that they are fear of a recession, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that are already considering a small recession into their budgeting, and if that may have an impact on or disrupt a little bit of traveling. And the other thing is increased competition. And increased competition is not only new hotels being built, so new rooms into the market, but it's also the short-term rentals and how that's affecting many, many destinations. When we ask them about their strength, so more on a positive note, here is where we're gonna be seeing a lot of what I've been discussing. So we talk about leisure, that is important, it's really helping the business. We talk about international demand coming back, events, and also groups. So we pretty much have most of the segments. So what I call the new normal, or what we're really seeing now, is that international demand is back, China aside, and that's gonna have a huge impact for some markets more than others when the Chinese return to traveling fully. Then we close the gap between leisure and corporate. So we're going back to the normal type of business. Luxury is being very resilient when it comes to ADR, but it's slowing down. And then I'll ask you this, are you guys returning to your office, your teams back? Do we think that's gonna impact corporate traveling? Because that's the only big question here, because pretty much all of the segments are back. We look at them, there's a strong combination of different type of segments that are back. So the only thing that is not normal is that people are not yet coming back to the offices. And that is a big debate that may affect corporate traveling. So I just leave you with that question. But thank you very much.
Very nice.
Thank you.
And welcome back, Lise. All right, well, thank you for all of your questions. You responded to the call.
Give you that.
How about them? Wasn't that awesome? Did they do a nice job? Very good. Enough questions, we won't get through all of them, but you do have a chance to vote, and so we're going to go ahead and start right up top. There's a question about the difference between remote work locations versus vacation stays, and how do we know what travelers are searching for, and how do we differentiate whether that's remote work or whether it's a vacation stay?
Oh, well, I can start if you want. That's a good question. We actually don't have the answer to that question exactly, because we don't know exactly where, if people are looking to travel to work remotely or not. But according to the data we have, we can just assume, because we see that people are searching for longer stays than 2019. So we can just assume that in general, if they're staying longer, is because they are working remotely. Well, you know, digital nomads, I don't really like that word either, but it's a clear tendency. And pleasure that you mentioned also, that we all travel for work and stay over the weekend as well in the different destinations. But yeah.
Like you are.
Huh? Like I am, exactly.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add?
No, I also don't like the digital nomad term, because I think it was very trendy during the pandemic, but I don't think it's what we're seeing now. I think it's more that leisure component than anything else.
I need to have a new badge made. Mine says digital nomad. So
Really?
I kind of like to be liked. All right.
Sounds great.
No, I'm just kidding. So I love this question, and it's about vacation rentals versus hotels and resorts. Who's winning?
Oh, no one.
Is that a sensitive topic?
Let's
go for it.
There is space for everybody. So, do you want to
I would say there's a space for everybody, but I want to support hotels. So we only track data for hotels and resorts. So that's what I can comment on.
Well, we track data, search data for all the different accommodation that you saw in the presentation. And what I can say is that hotel reduced a bit during the 2-3 years of those last 3 years, to not mention pandemics. And vacation rental had a bit of a spike in terms of click share. But now it's come back to normal, and hotels are leading the way again, and vacation rental is more or less like the same click share as it was before. So I'd say that there is room for everybody in the sector, and we all want to travel, and depending on the destination, you choose one or the other. But it shouldn't be, like, competition is good, what you mentioned, so I think it's a good one.
And I'll give you a booking perspective on this, because I just looked at the data last night, which would suggest that vacation rental industry in LATAM has definitely grown a little bit, but so has the hotel resort segment as well. And so as a result, I think that both are doing well, but not at the expense of each other. The market seems to be expanding. This is really what we see.
Just one comment. I think that we're seeing more of a professionalized vacation rental spectrum right now, right? Like, it's not like it used to be, so I think that benefits the industry as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is that for digital nomads? Okay, during the pandemic, the packaging segment saw a big decline. Do you see a full recovery of this segment already?
Which segment?
Packaging. People, I assume that means
Backpacking?
buying packages.
Oh, packaging. Sorry.
Flight
Go
stays.
backpacking?
Hotels.
Yeah. Oh,
Sorry, I'm not in this industry.
We do have a vertical of packages, although it's not available in all the countries, and it's still a small part of searches in kayak. So we don't have that many numbers to really show for, I would say, for
okay.
packages.
Very good. But we have heard you loud and clear that you want us to enable packages. So we think that, one, there's current demand today, but likely, perhaps, growing demand going forward as well. So we take that away. Here's our final question. This is a fun one. What's the next new big destination coming from Mexico?
I'd say, well, at
Coming
least,
for Mexico, excuse me. So within Mexico.
well, for what we have seen, at least in terms of destination tendency, at least looking at LATAM overall, we've seen Buenos Aires that has grown a lot, as I mentioned, in Argentina. And I'd say also for the region, we have seen Bogota. That is the one that has grown the most in comparison to 2019. So definitely like one of the big destinations tendency.
I thought you would go for Mexico, so I'll go for Mexico. I agree with you, especially Bogota. We've seen huge growth. I'm based there, so I can say that I've seen it. But I think within Mexico, if I have to put my own money somewhere, I definitely will still go for sort of the resort destinations. I mean, Mexico is so big and has so many different destinations, beach destinations, that there's still opportunities for development, and that I think there's, you know, something unique that they can offer and people want to see. So, yeah.
I'm going to ask you to name one or two.
I
Because
think
you said put
Punta
your money there.
Mita.
I want to think about it. I'm thinking investment now.
money?
You want to share investments? No, but like from Punta Mita to, I don't know, there's so many places that are coming up, you know, outside of the traditional
Larger
destinations.
I'd say a lot of people would say here because, as you all know, like there are big investments that are done here, like the train, the airport of Tulum. So I guess those infrastructure investments that are coming up at the end of this year or next year will probably boost this region specifically and all the Mayan region, let's say. But I would love also to see a bit more of the Pacific coast. I don't know, I'm a big lover of destinations like Puerto Escondido, not a digital nomad destination.
Awesome. Very good. Well, please join me in thanking Patricia, Elise. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.
That way?
All right. So our next session, we're going to give you a third perspective, and that's from within Booking. And so I'd love to now invite out our panelists, Laura, Carlo, and Fiona. All right, so I'll do the introductions here. Laura runs and leads our Asia Pacific business, and she joins us from Singapore today. Carlo leads our Europe, Middle East, and Africa business, and he joins us from Amsterdam and Paris, where he splits his time. And you've been introduced to Fiona. She runs the globe. She's responsible for all the leaders.
Whoa.
Yeah, you see where the power sits up in this panel. It's not the guy with no hair. And she also joins us from Amsterdam as well. And now just to set the context a little bit, when we look at Booking.com now and our business in Latin America, what we've seen in the last 3 years, really since pre-pandemic, we've seen room nights grow about 39%. So we're very happy with that. We've seen your revenue grow 80%. And as you know, that's driven by what you've already heard and experienced, which is the increase in ADR that's been happening over time. And what we've also know is that it's a very diverse region. This whole region is not Mexico, and this whole region is not Brazil. And that diversity looks like countries with significant, very dominant domestic travel, and that would be Brazil. And then we've got the countries that are very dependent on international inbound, and that would be Mexico, Caribbean as two examples, if you will. And so when we look at where are people coming from, as you know, US and Canada are very, very important and significant markets for you, but also Europe. And while Europe continues to increase their outbound into Latin America, we see France, UK, Germany, and Spain as those key markets. Now, with regards to Asia, we look back and there hasn't been a tremendous amount of demand, even pre-pandemic. But maybe there's something to hope for, and maybe we think about more mid to long-term strategy, there might be something there. And that's what Laura's going to share with us today. That just grounds the conversation, and that's what we're going to talk about right now. We're going to start with Carlo. Europe, as you may know, is a very, very significant market for Booking.com. It's where we were founded, and so our market presence is very significant. In fact, it influences the total company in a big way. And so I'd love to spend the first round of questions here just kind of grounding on where are we, kind of in terms of the recovery, because it's very different by region. And then we'll go a little further on that later. So Carlo, could you kind of just give us the picture of what's happening in Europe and how that influences the world?
Sure, happy to do so. Hi everyone, very happy to be here with you today. So basically what we have seen is already in 2022, 2022 was a record-breaking year for Booking. So we generated during that year a total of 900 million room nights, which represented a growth of 6% versus 2019, meaning that at the end of 2022, we reached volumes that were already above the pre-pandemic period. And when we look at the revenue, we also have seen very strong ADR due to, I would say, an ever low price demand elasticity in the market, and the revenue grew by 13%. So that was 22. And then we were getting into 2023, and we did not know if the demand will remain that resilient. And Q1 was also a record-breaking quarter, the strongest Q1 ever, plus 40%. And what we saw there then is that people tend to book their trips, their holidays much earlier than in the past. So Q1 was a record-breaking, and then Q2 was also above our expectations. You know, we grew in Q2 our volumes by 9% versus 2022, and the revenue grew by 27%. So very strong period. And then getting into the third quarter, which is the travel peak for our business, especially in Europe, and then the business started accelerating again by 20%, mainly due to very robust leisure demand. And now when we look at the end of the year, we see that the pace or the rooms on the books is still higher than 2019. So very positive trends. So we're very much encouraged by the continued strength and resiliency of the travel demand, despite the very complex geopolitical climate in the world and in Europe. Despite a tough macroeconomic situation with high inflation, we're quite optimistic. And we see that the travel demand from all major European booker markets, but also in the Middle East, but also across the Americas, and now in APAC, because you know in 2023 progressively all the restrictions have been banned in that part of the world. For the first time, the recovery is truly global. So that should lead to a positive outlook in the upcoming weeks and the upcoming months.
That was optimistic. I'm kind of pumped up over that. Let's talk about the US and Canada. Maybe I'll come to you, Fiona. Such important markets, and also outside of Mexico, one of the two of the countries that really recovered first or early on, I would say. What's it looking like today?
Super positive. I think looking at the US booker, probably the most optimistic coming out of the pandemic, which is important for us because we're really also investing into that market. But if I look at some of the data, slightly different to what we saw earlier from one of the presenters there, in the way we look at how the booker room nights improved into LATAM, we saw a whopping 100% growth versus 2019 coming into Mexico, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, and Jamaica, which is really quite astounding. But also Other countries that did reasonably well with their inbound growth of 50%, not shoddy either, were Argentina, we had Colombia, Brazil and Costa Rica as well. So both those groups together, it really is positive with the US booker who wants to travel. And for Booking, we're actually interested in investing in North America, obviously in Americas in total, but our brands too. So it matters to us to also be where that US booker is, because they're international travelers with gusto and want to be everywhere. And you may have seen we'd invested in the Super Bowl earlier this year, and we just before the summer signed a 5-year deal with Major League Baseball. And there's also some exciting sponsorships coming together in the area of partnerships with LATAM Airlines. So it is positive, and we're making most of that to bring what we can to LATAM.
Some impressive growth numbers there that you're also part of as well. We're not creating that all for you. We're doing it together. And Laura, so I mentioned Mexico because I heard last night that in some parts of Mexico, it seemed like the pandemic didn't even have any impact on business, and in other parts, maybe there was some. And that was amazing to hear it as strongly as I heard it last night, and very inspiring, by the way. And then I think of Asia, which is on the opposite end, which really didn't even begin recovery for at least a couple years after perhaps the rest of the world. But I know it's a mixed message. What's happening there?
It is mixed, and I like the fact that you immediately dismissed Asia to start with, as nobody's coming here, but that's not true. I think we're going to see much more of it. The reality is we're still less than a year into the recovery in Asia Pacific. So China only came online this year, as we know, in January, with an almost overnight switch. But even this time last year, North Asia, so Japan, Korea, Taiwan, all the North Asian countries were also still closed. So there is still a lot of catching up to do, but what we have seen, and we followed a similar trend to Europe and to the Americas, that once borders open, we saw the demand coming back very, very fast. And even in Q2 this year, actually, Asia was the fastest growing region by 40% in room nights, and that was at a Booking Holdings group level. So we know that it's coming back, and we can see even with China still coming a little slower because infrastructure is not there yet. But one thing we did last year is to try and understand, okay, as borders open, what will it mean for travelers? What will they look for? What will influence the way that they travel? And so we actually launched a Traveler Confidence Index last year, and it was really to understand what's the sentiment of travelers. Do they feel confident to travel? If so, where will they go? And so we surveyed 11,000 travelers across 11 countries in Asia Pacific to understand that. And it was interesting to see what level of comfort travelers had. And even at that point with China closed, China was actually number 2 in terms of confidence to travel. We did it again this year, but with a slightly different twist. It was not just purely on safety of travel, which was the primary driver for last year, primary concern for last year. This year, it's much more about everything else we can see. Safety still is number 1 for the Asia travelers, but there is also inflationary costs, rising costs, infrastructure not being there. So what now is driving travelers was one of the things we wanted to know this year. And we saw a number of things come out of that. Number 1, 73% of travelers said that they are unwaveringly optimistic about travel, meaning that they will still continue to do so. So that was also really interesting to see. We also saw that more than 50% said whatever happens, they're not changing their plans. They have travel plans the next 12 months, that's not changing. Also good news for us. But I think what's also interesting is the top 3 countries this year was Hong Kong, China, and India. Hong Kong, China, India. And it's also very interesting for us, I think, as a destination to think 2 of the most populous countries in the world are in those top 3. 1.4 billion potential travelers each in both China and India. That's a huge amount of opportunity that we need to think about to capture. And these travelers are wanting to do more and more, and they're wanting to go further afield, and they're wanting to understand what is out there. So we also then, as part of that confidence index, we looked at, okay, how do we look at what those travelers, how do we segment those travelers, and then how do we think about capturing the demand? So 2, I think, that are most relevant for the Latin American market are, the first was our conscious explorer, meaning that they have a high confidence to travel and a high sustainability approach to their travel. So with a rich ecotourism here in this market, I think this is an area of travelers that we should be paying very much attention to. The second one was the comfort seeker, as we've defined it, meaning that they're still slightly less confident to travel, but still very high intent on their conscious travel. And they are looking for comfort and convenience. Again, I think a space that this market can also think about, how do we make sure that we capture this traveler? And For the conscious explorer, it was again Hong Kong, China, India, and Taiwan as travel source markets where they want to travel in this way. For the comfort explorer, it was more Australia, Singapore. So again, when we're thinking about how do we attract these travelers, it's really important to think about what are they looking for. And so for us, it was quite an eye-opening survey.
That's wonderful.
Running out of time.
And I did not mean to be dismissive, so I apologize for that, especially after you create all this potential afterwards.
There's a huge amount of potential in this traveler space, and I think that there's a space for us to think about how do we capture it.
That's wonderful. So let's look forward. So that's a little bit about where we're at. Hopefully that's helpful and gives you a little view of each region. But now let's look forward 6 months, 12 months. We obviously can't predict the future. I think there's an election or two coming up this next year, one in US, one in Mexico, I understand. And you know those can change a lot economically and affect travel and what have you. But we do have trends, and we do have some insights, and we do have some forward-looking insights as well. Carlo, let's talk about Europe. What are you seeing, and is there something to be hopeful for here?
So I would say the first main trend is the resilience of travel demand, way beyond what we could have expected. Some neuropsychologists even say that travel has become a vital need. The travel industry used to be a cyclical industry, so basically if the economy is good, travel is good. If the economy is not good, travel is bad. Over the past 2 years, it has become a counter-cyclical segment. Basically, economy is not good, travel keeps booming. So that's quite surprising, which means that travel demand is very resilient. And when we look at the behavior of the consumers, of the travelers, we don't see any changes. Despite the high inflation, they are not trading down. So they are not booking lower category hotels or lower category accommodations. They are also not reducing their length of stay. So that's quite impressive. So that's the first. And even on the contrary, we see that they tend to book earlier in advance and they cancel less, which really shows that there is a very strong intent to travel. The second trend is international demand is back. In the second quarter of 23, for the first time, we recovered the international mix or the international volume of room nights that we had in 2019. 54% of the room nights booked during the second quarter were international room nights on our platform. So we see a lot of we will see more and more international demand coming our way. The second element is when we look at people tend to book much earlier. So what we have seen in Europe, people have been booking their spring and summer holidays much earlier than in the past. In a way, we had the feeling that they wanted to secure a rate because they knew the rates were going up. So, we need to book fast to be able to organize our vacation. So in the month of February, which is the key booking month, we see that 30% of the booking made on the platform by European travelers were for checkouts from May onwards, so much earlier than they normally do. The third trend that we see is that people, during the pandemic, people want to work from home. Some have to go back to the office, but still we have more flexibility. And then the travelers have discovered that they can also work from anywhere. And that's a huge opportunity for our industry because that will increase the amount of travel that we see happening. And what we see, the first consequence we see in Europe, but I think you will see also this in your region, is an increase in the volume of last-minute bookings for weekend stays. People really want to travel, so when they have the opportunity, they make that last-minute choice. And also we see that the pattern of weekends is changing. It used to be 2 nights, now it moves more to 3 or 4 nights. So nice opportunity, I would say, for our industry. At the same time, what we see is that people tend to cancel less. So when they make their trip decision, they want to go on their trip. They want to make that trip. But even if they do cancel less, they still want to have some sort of security. So what we see is that 80% of the bookings made on the platform are made on flexible policies. So travelers are looking for flexibility, but also ease of use. And one of the consequences that we see that the share of mobile bookings keep growing. Currently, 2/3 of the bookings made on our platform are made on a mobile device. And 48% of the room nights generated during the second quarter of this year were booked on our apps, which is huge. And this represents a growth of 6 points versus the year before. So that's also another big trend. And I will say the last trend that we see happening is an increase, but you also see that happening, it's an increased focus on sustainability. When we ask the travelers, basically 81% of them say that traveling sustainability is important to them. 74% say that they want more sustainable travel options. Over 50% consider that they are not enough. And what is interesting is that 44% are telling us they don't know where to find these travel options. That's why we have put together our travel sustainable program. And we currently have over 600,000 properties in the world that are part of it. And really the way is to match the customer intent, which is that they want to travel more sustainably.
That's great. And I think those are going to be some key themes, I think, also as we look to North America, Canada, and US. You know, last year was just the biggest year ever. 2022, I think, exceeded our expectations for sure. And we're sitting here with goals this year trying to build on top of what was our biggest year. And I think some of you have actually seen that too. What feels like a softening might be a softening in relation to growing on the year before. But interested in your thoughts here, Fiona,
Yeah, let's see if
on
we
the
can see
future of US and Canada as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's see if we can see some comparisons back to Carlo's data there, because guess what? The US booker travels earlier, books earlier, and so the booking window is about 48 days now, which is increasing 10% year on year. So lots of reason to like that. They also stay longer, 10% versus others. So not exactly the same, but some similarities. But you will find them on mobile. So 60% of the US bookers are booking through mobile, which is increasing. I think it's about 12 points year on year. So definitely where to try to attract them. But what I find interesting is they like a taste of luxury in a certain sense. And the US bookers booking coming into both Mexico and the Caribbean are booking, 80% of them are booking 4 to 5 star resorts, which is good news. And it's a good forward-looking position as well. So already looking forward year on year, we probably have about 5% growth in that market. So all of those trends are ones we want to have, and they're moving in the right direction.
Awesome, awesome. You mentioned China and India as the two highest populated countries in the world that have not yet fully recovered. Interested on how do you see the next 12 months or so?
Yeah, I think this is a space for us to watch very, very closely. For China particularly, as I mentioned, it opened overnight, literally overnight on the 8th of January this year, with a prediction that it would not open for many months. But there was a turnabout, and China opened the borders, but what didn't happen in time was the infrastructure was not in place. Flight capacity was not there, passports were not ready, visas were not ready. There are many reasons why the China outbound market has not recovered to anywhere near its pre-pandemic levels. What has recovered very significantly is the domestic space in China, and that's because of the government were also pushing very hard for that. But as the infrastructure starts to come back, we're at about 50% flight capacity outbound right now from China. The prediction, and we had Google speak at our Elevate event just a couple of weeks ago in Asia, and the prediction is by the end of 2024 is only when we will see full flight recovery, meaning that there's some time, we need to get ready for it, but the Chinese travelers we do know are also shifting a little bit, meaning that we're seeing much more younger travelers wanting to travel further, also traveling much more independently, whereas previously it was very much organized tours only. Now we're starting to see a lot more independence. But I think India, honestly, is the one to watch. And many destinations, certainly within Asia Pacific and even around the globe, have looked to India to fill the void that we've had from the Chinese travelers. And again, it's a very fast rising middle class. Young travelers want to explore, want to experience very new cultures for them. So I would say that, two to watch. But India, I think we should track very closely.
A lot to be hopeful for.
Very much.
For sure. We've covered a lot today in this and previous two presentations. As you take a global view, Fiona, how would you put a bow around all this?
If I look at, travel's back to the levels we saw pre-pandemic, but the biggest takeaway for me is looking at back to our traveller. I think what we want and what we're looking for and what we value has probably changed. It's what it certainly is looking back into our numbers. This is some survey data here from about over 33 countries. We talked to 43,000 consumers at the end of last year just to see if what we think is also reflected there, and it's true. We spent so much time at home, we want to get out and do different things, and the idea of a vacation off the grid is what people are looking for, although my kids still want Wi-Fi, so I don't think I can sell that one at home. But people are willing to try things, and certainly looking at how we use technology. Our love of technology from being sitting on a screen at home throughout that time hasn't gone away. And VR is now a part of how travelers are wanting to explore or experience destinations before they go, which makes opportunities for how we bring your wonderful locations to life. But also importantly, I think, we all talk about, ADRs and things are growing, but value and how consumers are actually experiencing that has changed. And you'll see travelers are actually looking to basically use deals, or I hate the word hacks, but I think that's what the younger people call that nowadays, 63% of those. But actually looking for value for money, and actually looking to use discount programs, loyalty programs and things like that across the board to actually help with those. And that's where we can sort of look at how can we, Booking, help you do those, because we have many of those mechanics. So exciting times, value top of mind, and we want some different stuff, Bob.
Awesome. Very good. So just to wrap it up here, you've heard a lot. There's been a lot to be thankful for as well as hopeful for. I think a number of these programs and products, and I think of as enablers, you have utilized amazingly effectively. And this afternoon there will be 2 more sessions, one on visibility and one on pricing, where a number of these will be covered on how you can best position yourself with products that matter most to you, perhaps. And with that, we're out of time. And I would love your help thanking Laura, Carlo, and Fiona. Thank you.